Where I start getting really, really excited about the NFL draft is not the first or even second round picks in talent. Because, yeah, as you say, a lot of your, but not all of your stars come from those rounds. Those are the premium picks. Those are the ones that get the most attention via the draft cycle. But it's those that have the most passion for the draft process, that understand that it's really rounds 3 through 6 where your core is built of a championship team. As you get to the end of day 2 and you get to day 3, that's the time for the nerdgasms, right? When we think about scouting. So it's when you start talking about these prospects, to me, it gets a little more exciting because, man, if you hit on one of them, like you come out and you say, I'm pounding the table, this dude's going to be a stud, I don't give a fuck what round he's taken in, you look like a genius. And if you get it wrong, you still rated up as like a 3rd or 4th round talent anyway, so ain't nobody going to pay any fucking attention. So anyways, especially when it comes to the running back position, we know that you can get very good, great superstar running backs all throughout the draft. And every year NFL teams will take to the draft and look for backs late day 2, early to mid round 3, and be looking for guys that could come in and be difference makers. And one guy that I look at in this year's draft class and see a potential difference maker is De'Von Achane from Texas A&M. He's not the biggest guy, but what you really like about him, he's got explosive quickness, burst, hits the hole really quickly. Like, he can get moving with alacrity. He can get to top speed in a hurry. And once he gets to his top speed, he's got big time top end speed. It makes him a major home run threat. Like when you're talking about guys that you draft, rounds 3, rounds 4, rounds 5, there are different philosophies in terms of guys that you could target. You could say, hey, I'm going to target this guy that was productive in college, but maybe they're missing this one key attribute or these 2 key kind of physical traits. Or you're gambling on the guys that are height, weight, speed kind of prospects, but very raw, require a lot of coaching. Or you draft guys for speed. And you're drafting a guy like De'Von Achane for speed because he's got it in great abundance. Not only that, it's not just straight line speed and quickness. It's the agility, the quickness, the flexibility to make defenders miss in the open field. So he can make things happen even when they're not there. He also shows, for a smaller back, good awareness and feel for his assignments in pass protection. When you look at a guy with his profile, you're thinking about, potentially a complementary back, a 3rd down back, a change of pace back. You sometimes will have to keep them in to pick up blitzes, and in pass protection, you want that guy to know what the hell he's doing. He's also, for a guy of his size, he's got pretty impressive upper body strength and contact balance to be able to bounce off of and run through arm tackles. And also, again, when you're talking about guys that you're looking at maybe in late day 2, early to mid day 3 of the draft, you've got a running back like this, you want them to be able to have some pass catching skills. He's got a very extensive route tree for a running back. He's not just a flats and, out patterns type of guy. He's not that at all. He's got a pretty extensive route tree for a running back. And when you watch him, one thing that really stands out that really impressed me is that he's a much better downhill runner than you would give him credit for. He's really effective between the tackles relative to his height, his size, his weight, his bulk. You would look at that type of guy and say they're going to be huge liability between the tackles and they got to make their living on the periphery, on the edges. And that's not necessarily the case with Achane. I'm not saying he's going to feast between the tackles in the NFL, but he's got a better suited game for between the tackles running than you might think. Now, things that stand out about him that give you some concern and why he wouldn't be maybe a higher pick: he lacks the size that you want from every down back. Also, with that kind of quickness, speed, and then small size kind of package, those guys sometimes can lose yards when they try to make too much happen because they're trying to avoid that big contact. It certainly is the case for Achane as well. Also, there's a piece of patience and waiting too long. And sometimes Achane will wait too long. He's a little too deliberate in instances for waiting for the blocking develop and the holes to open in front of him. And sometimes I think that's because he's trying to hit the home run instead of just taking what the defense gives him. And what's interesting, I called out that he's surprisingly effective as an in-between the tackles, in the box kind of runner, but his running style doesn't match his physical profile. So that could lead you to some concerns about whether he's going to be able to hold up well at the NFL level or not. And especially for a back with Achane's kind of smaller size profile and the type of role you might at least initially envision for him at the NFL, you're going to want him to be, an important cog in your passing game, especially in passing situations, third and long and so forth. And his hands are really hit and miss, especially throws that are even just a little bit off the mark. He'll make a great catch, he'll make a fundamental catch, but then he'll have a really bad drop or two. And you worry about your ability to trust him in the passing game, having reliable hands as a pass catcher. I was struggling a little bit to come up with comparisons for Achane. I thought of him as, the way I thought of him was a little bit smaller version of Jamaal Charles. And Jamaal Charles obviously had a really solid career, really good career for the Kansas City Chiefs. And if I recall correctly, he was a former third-round pick out of Texas. He was a guy that had questions about whether he could hold up as an every down back, and certainly had his injury problems at times in the NFL. But this was a guy that when he got the ball in his hands, he could make some electric things happen, and that speed could change games. And Achane could be that type of back. I've got a third-round grade on him right now because I wish he was a little bit more effective, more consistently as a pass catcher. I wish he was a little bit bigger because, you're envisioning him maybe as more of a high-end role player type of back versus a starter feature back type of guy, although I think there is some feature back potential here. But there are other backs in this draft that I feel a little bit better about having true feature back potential. But if you look at this guy and you say, worst case scenario, he gets on the field, you find a few touches for him each game, and he can make one or two plays that change field position for you a little bit. That's what this guy can do. So I wouldn't be surprised because of his speed if somebody took him in round 2, or if he lasted until early day 3 because of his size and maybe some concerns about that. But De'Von Achane is a good prospect, and I certainly would expect that he should come off the board sometime on day 2, probably in round 3, and the team is probably going to be pretty happy with what they get him.